Okay, a single draft can determine a whole decade. This is RamView.
It's hot out there, but let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline,
Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident, need help, got questions, call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's 661-206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. That's one word, KistlerLawFirm.com. Kistler Law. They've been fighting for you since 92. And by Temple City Auto Repair. Having some auto issues, get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. So we are in the Ram Cave. It is April 26, 2023. The draft is finally here, right? Tomorrow we do the draft, and I'm still thinking on where I want to sneak in the extra show. Early tomorrow morning, tomorrow night after the draft, someplace in there. We might fit one in, maybe Saturday, because we could discuss what the Rams did on Friday. News is buzzing all around, and of course you're getting all the hot takes. You know, Will Levis has gone up, C.J. Stroud has gone down, and everything. And I've been on record. I think I said it a week ago, or maybe just the most recent show, that I really think that C.J. Stroud could be the guy that drops a la Dan Marino. It wouldn't be the first time a quarterback that hits all the marks just drops for one reason or another. And it's because I think people over-scrutinize, over-analyze. I keep hearing someone like Colin Cowherd say he doesn't see the juice with C.J. Stroud. I don't know. I see a big, strong, athletic quarterback who can throw the ball downfield, and yet there's just not that wow factor. I don't know. I see Bryce Young, and I see a guy that's going to get ragdolled. I see Will Levis. I see Drew Lock. I see Anthony Richardson, and I just see a guy that someone's hoping he's going to be the next Lamar Jackson. And now all these guys could pan out, but you don't know what's really going to happen with these guys. And yet C.J. Stroud seems to be the one that's being punished, or someone's just talking him down so maybe he does drop and they can get him. What really somewhat hurt C.J. Stroud was his score on the S2 test. Now, the S2 test is the new cognitive test that has replaced the old Wonderlic. It's not a new improved Wonderlic. It's a different test. Now, here's a funny story. Back in the day, I actually worked camps, summer camps, with the family and one of the guys that helped found this S2 test. And I guess if I pressed it enough, I could drop names, but I don't want to do that. But yeah, so I do know the person who was one of the key people, one of the doctors now. He was just a college student when I met him, but he's a doctor now, and he was key in putting together this S2 test. And so it is the new driving thing where the Wonderlic has been replaced, but the Wonderlic was controversial as well. And I'm not bagging on the S2 or anything, but no one really knows what anybody's going to do until this thing is in their hands and 300-pound guys who run 4.5 40s are coming to knock their heads off, right? No one really knows. For the audio audience, it's the football I'm holding up. No one really knows what they're going to do. And I mean, there were people that thought Tony Eason, Ken O'Brien, and Todd Blackledge in the 1983 draft were better than Dan Marino. And that's how Dan Marino dropped all the way to number 27. Can you imagine the Dolphins getting the second to last pick in the first round because they lost the Super Bowl, and they get the 27th overall pick, and Dan Marino falls into their lap, right? Here's another interesting thing. When you look at the Wonderlic, which was the previous measure of how they engaged a quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Harvard guy, had one of the highest grades ever. He scored a 48. The average was 24. The Harvard guy, Fitzpatrick, scored a 48. The Alabama guy, Greg McElroy, also scored a 48. But you know who else scored a 48? Actually, a 42. Blaine Gabbert scored a 42, 18 above the average. Colin Kaepernick scored a 38, 14 above the average. And if you're a Ram fan, Sam Bradford scored a 35, and Christian Ponder, if you're a Viking fan, scored a 35. Christian Ponder is the only guy that wasn't a first-round talent drafted in the first round, but it allowed him to find a wife that he was going to marry. So I guess it all worked out for him, if not for the Vikings. But so the Wonderlic doesn't mean anything if you're really good at it. But who had the worst Wonderlic scores? Did you know Dan Marino, Hall of Famer, Jim Kelly, Hall of Famer, Terry Bradshaw, Hall of Famer, all scored 15 on the Wonderlic score, 9 below the average. And Donovan McNabb, another Pro Bowl guy who went to a Super Bowl, was a very good quarterback. He scored 15 on it too. So what does that tell you about some of these tests? It's nothing's going to tell you anything until until someone's pressing down on you when you're trying to throw this thing. Nothing's going to tell you about a player until they have to shoot free throws with 16,000 people screaming at them, right? LeBron James is a great player, but I don't know if LeBron James is the guy you want on the foul line with 1.4 seconds to play and your team trailing by 2. He's the greatest player of his generation, I guess, but I don't know if I want him on the line. I just don't. So you don't know what you're going to do until the crucible moment happens. And so I wouldn't get too caught up in this test, and I wouldn't get too caught up in saying CJ Stroud is the guy that's going to drop, when I think there's less mystery to CJ Stroud than there is to Bryce Young, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. In fact, I feel most comfortable with after CJ Stroud is Hendon Hooker. All right, so we got that in. Some NFL news. Aaron Rodgers is going to wear his college number with the Jets. I was actually at the Aaron Rodgers game against USC where he completed like 20 consecutive passes and SC made the goal line stand. Yeah, he was fantastic in that game. And my friend Steve Ramirez actually made the note of it, I don't know, on a Twitter account or social media post where he made mention of it, that Jeff Tedford's quarterbacks at Cal generally were flops, and Aaron Rodgers kind of broke that mold for Jeff Tedford quarterbacks. You're thinking Kyle Bowler and others that have gone through there, and so yeah, Steve pointed that out. When I saw Aaron Rodgers wearing number 8, all the thing he's going to wear number 8. That's why we're talking about Cal. Hey man, I don't know. I don't know what you thought, but what I thought was Browning Nagel. Any Jet fans remember Browning Nagel? He had that marvelous 1992 season, 17 touchdowns, 17 interceptions or something like that. 7 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. Browning Nagel. Yeah. I don't want my Jet quarterback wearing number 8. So here's another thing I want to throw out there. Everybody concerning this NFL draft has a story, right? And I noticed it this week. It was starting and it's going on right now, and everybody has a story. Everybody has a background, and I got to tell you, nothing is worse than the red carpet at the NFL draft and the manufactured efforts to get us to feel something for these kids when they go through. I don't care if they're playing for their grandma who died 10 years ago. I don't. There's this great scene in the movie Draft Day where the lead guy, Vontae Mack, gets thrown out of a game because he hands the ball into the stands, and they say, you can't hand the ball to your girlfriend in the stands. And then they come back and say, he gave it to his sister. She was dying of cancer. And then Dennis Leary, who's playing the head coach, he actually has the most honest response of anything in the movie. He says, boo frickin' who, right? We're running a football team here, not a social group here. And so I really don't care what their backstories are. There are players that come from one-parent homes that have had everything thrown against them, and they flame out in the NFL. And then we've had players who come from the best backgrounds, and you'd think that they wouldn't have anything to play for, and they become stars. And you see the players that come from having nothing, star, and the players who come from a great background fail. It doesn't make any difference. What do they do when they've got this thing in their hands and it's 350 pounds of meat ready to fall down on them? What do they do in that moment? And so I really don't care. I got to tell it right now because I'm going to puke my guts out tomorrow night, because we're going to have Melissa Stark or whoever there on the red carpet, asking all those questions, and they're going to show all the backgrounds of how someone came from a hard existence and everything. I don't care. Right? I got to tell you, even as a very conservative guy, if I thought Michael Sam was better than Ethan Westbrook's, I'd have said keep Michael Sam, because I just want to know what you're going to do when this thing is kicked off, right? I just want to know what you're going to do on the field. I don't want to make a special project. I don't want to have a feel-good moment. So, cool. Did I get that out of my system? I think I got it out of my system. We're at the 11-minute mark. All right, let's get going here. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was some of the Rams' history on this day, okay? And the Rams' history on this day is really interesting. It starts with, on this day, the Rams traded Mike Fanning to the Detroit Lions, for a fifth round, 133rd overall pick in 1984. And I thought that was interesting because in 75, Fanning had been a number one draft pick for the Rams. He did a solid job for the Rams. He wasn't all pro, but he did a solid job. Interesting also, on this same day, right? On the same day, the Rams drafted in 2012 Michael Brockers. Do you know how Michael Brockers' career ended with the Rams? He was also traded to the Detroit Lions. Michael Brockers was a really good DT, but he wasn't spectacular. He wasn't anything near Aaron Donald, as Fanning wasn't anything near Larry Brooks or Merlin Olsen. But I just thought it was interesting that on this day in 83, Fanning was traded to the Lions, and on this day in 2012, Michael Brockers was drafted by the Rams, and Brockers ended up getting traded to the Detroit Lions after about 9 years in LA. So just interesting thing there. But speaking of that 1983 draft, one of the things I made a point with at the top of the show, can one draft determine a decade? Well, in 1983, in the 1983 draft, that's the first draft with John Robinson in the room, and unfortunately, John Shaw. Here's who the Rams drafted. And the 1983 NFL draft is considered by many one of the greatest drafts of all time. And something like 7 future Hall of Famers were drafted in the first round. 8 others were Pro Bowlers that were taken in the first round. So 15 of the 28 were Hall of Famers and Pro Bowlers. And I'm not counting players like Willie Gault, Jim Jeffcoat, or even Green Bay cornerback Tim Lewis. You might remember him. He had the neck injury, who was off to a nice start with his career before it came to an end. There were a lot of great players in the 83 draft. And we're not even talking second round. We're not even talking second or third round. Or where was it? 8th round, Richard Dent became an All-Pro. So in that 1983 draft, John Robinson and John Shaw selected Eric Dickerson, Henry Ellard, Mike Wilcher, Doug Reed, and Vince Newsom. You're talking starters that affected the entire decade of the 80s. With one draft, the Rams got 5 starters, a couple of Pro Bowlers, and a pretty decent rotational down lineman. That's an amazing draft. That's how you establish yourself going forward. You look at that Rams 2019 draft, very successful draft, but you're not going to sign the second contracts because we have a salary cap now that you didn't have in 83. But all those players became contributors. Nearly every player except for Dakota Allen became a contributor to some level on that team. I don't think we talk about Bobby Evans, though. So, 1983, greatest draft ever. Rams take Dickerson, Ellard, Wilcher, Doug Reed, and Vince Newsom. Okay, awesome sauce, all right? Same day in 1992, on this day in 1992, the Rams drafted Sean Gilbert, Steve Israel, Mark Boutte, and Todd Kitchen. None of those guys were in the playoffs. Gilbert made one Pro Bowl in his career. Mark Boutte started one season for the Rams. Todd Kitchen had about 3 or 4 seasons, and probably is best remembered for a sparring match with the with the goalpost in St. Louis. That's how you kill a franchise. All right. Let's double down. On this day in 2003, the Rams drafted Jimmy Kennedy, Pisa Tino Isamoa. He was a linebacker. He wasn't bad. And Kevin Curtis with their first 3 picks. That's how you kill a franchise. By making those selections the Rams did in 83, they were set for the decade. By 92, drafting Sean Gilbert, Steve Israel, Mark Boutte, Todd Kitchen, they were the joke of the 90s. The literal joke of the 90s, maybe outside of the Bengals. They were the joke of the 90s. And then they came out of the greatest show on turf era by butchering draft picks left and right and taking Jimmy Kennedy in 2003, Kevin Curtis in the 3rd round. That's how you kill a franchise. And so all these drafts are highly critical. No matter where you select from, they are highly, highly critical. Also on this day in 2008, the Rams drafted Chris Long. That one did work out pretty well. You know, in the ongoing effort to replace Jack Youngblood with another white guy, right? Bill Hawkins, Grant Wistrom, Chris Long. They finally got the guy in Chris Long. On the same day, number 33 overall, they took Donnie Avery, who really didn't pan out. And then, of course, I mentioned in 2012, the Rams took Michael Brockers. Okay, we commercial time right now? Okay, we are commercial time. I'm Joe Terosian. I was a sports writer for 21 years, and I was one of the founding guys at Mid-Valley Sports with Tim and Dwayne, and they're covering the NFL right now. They're in the room with the Chargers, and I do RamView, right? And I do RamView, and I supplement my income doing RamView, and I write books. And so someone said, Joe, what's this other books you talk about? Well, this is my football book. This is the first book I wrote, well received, called Tangent Dreams, a high school football novel. But I also, I'm a Christian pastor, and I pastor a small church in Burbank Faith. You can find us right here on YouTube at burbankfaithvirtual.com, which a lot of folks have. Thank you for your support. But I supplement my income by writing books, and this is more of a Christian dystopian novel. And yeah, that's what I do. So I do this, and I do RamView, and these books are available on Amazon. Take a look at them. High school football. Much more fun, much more realistic than Friday Night Lights. And this one thinks Walking Dead meets Christianity. Okay. The reason I do that is to support my income as a pastor. And I'm blessed. A lot of guys have to drive Uber, take other kinds of jobs. I get to do what I love since I do have a background in the sports business. Excuse me. I get to talk sports. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Kistler Law Firm, as well as Temple City Auto Repair. Okay, a little more Ram history before we get to the Rams big board and our mock draft, a couple of mock drafts that we looked at from different perspectives. On this date in 1947, Willie Miller, wide receiver for the Rams, Colorado State guy, was born. He turns 76 today. Willie Miller was a Vietnam War hero. Willie Miller's story is off the charts. Willie Miller should have a movie made about him, and he's not going to. But he came back from the war, went to college, eventually got taken by the Browns, was there in 75, 76, only caught 7 passes, and then stuck with the Rams in 78. And he started 28 of 57 games. And he caught 105 passes for a non-passing team, 15 of them for touchdowns. And Willie Miller turned 76 today. We did a nice little piece on him last year on my website, and I'm sure you could find it somewhere on Facebook or some other place. Born on this day in 1953 was a guy named Doug France. Doug France was first-round draft pick of the Rams in 1975, 20th overall out of Ohio State. He had played some tight end for Woody Hayes, 6'5", 270. He sat on the bench his first year because Charlie Cowan was rounding out his career. And then France stepped in for 5 years, 1976 through 1980, played in 2 Pro Bowls, was a consistent starter, was a fantastic guy. And here's the interesting thing about Doug France is Doug France was outspoken. He was outspoken on social issues, racial issues, very verbose. He played in North Dallas 40. He was, I think it was the OC Weeks, and gets his leg broke in that. If Doug France had hit the peak of his career now, you would see Doug France everywhere. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2016 at the age of 62. But Doug France is a guy that missed his time. He was a guy born out of time. Not necessarily that you're going to agree on everything. He would walk out of camp and say, Rams front office was racist. He was one of those guys. And he fought. He spoke up a lot. And in 1978, 1979, he's just viewed as a chirper, right? Nowadays, he would be all over the place. And I always feel bad because he was a really good tackle for the Rams, but he was kind of born out of his time. He didn't play in 82, and the Rams dealt his rights to the Oilers, where he was their full-time starter in 1983 before retiring. The Rams, for the rights to Doug France, got back a 10th round, 253rd overall pick from the Oilers in the 1984 draft, and that turned into Norwood Van. Good Ram fans will remember, and I know Henry Yep out there probably does. Norwood Van was a heck. Woody Van was a heck of a special team guy for a couple seasons for the Rams. In fact, one of the games I was at Anaheim, Woody Van high-fived me. So I'm always been in the Woody Van camp, okay? Continuing on this date, in 1972, the Rams acquired Fred Dreyer from the Patriots. They sent a dude named Rick Cash, and the 11th overall pick in the 1973 draft turned out to be the 11th overall pick to the New England Patriots for Fred Dreyer. Now, Dreyer that January, after 3 seasons in in New York, was traded by the Giants to the Patriots. 3 months later, the Patriots sent him to the Rams. And so he never played in New England. Dreyer, 6'6", 240, locally, Lawndale, California, here in my neck of the woods. He was a 13th overall selection out of San Diego State by the Giants. And in his career, 103 sacks, 74 of them with the Rams. He registered 15 sacks for the Rams in 74 and was in double digits 3 other times for the Rams, 73, 75, 79. Never missed a game. Played in 14 postseason games for the Rams. So you could add almost another season to the times he played for the Rams. And postseason, he had 4 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries. And here's the sad part. Plays alongside Jack Youngblood, Hall of Famer. So he's going to eat all the energy in the room as far as attention. Not that Youngblood is an attention seeker. But then he's playing next to Larry Brooks. He's playing next to Merlin Olsen. And so his sack totals are just going to be what we would call average as they went back and reviewed all those sack totals. And then the other aspect of it is that Fred Dreyer was a personality. This is a guy that lived in his van. This is a guy that was quirky. This is a guy that did weird stuff. This is a guy who became an actor after his football career was over. And so I don't think he gets the credit he deserves during his time with the Rams. He was fantastic, but loved Fred Dreyer. In fact, I liked Fred Dreyer more than Jack Youngblood because I was listening on the radio the day that he sacked Scott Hunter and Jim Del Gazzo in the end zone, both of them in the second half against the Rams-Packers in a 24-7 Rams-Packers win. He got 2 safeties in the same game, and I think they were both in the same quarter. I was always a Fred Dreyer fan, and it was on this date in 1972 the Rams sent this dude Rick Cash and the first-round pick to the New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots used that 11th overall pick in 1973 to draft some dude named Sam Cunningham. You ever heard of Sam Cunningham? Yeah, I think we've heard of Sam Cunningham. Also, last note, Dreyer was a great example, too. He was like the first fruits of the building disaster the Rams were becoming after Rosenblum's passing, Georgia taking over, firing her stepson, and then all the weird things, the demoting and the removing of Don Klosterman, and then all these weird things were happening. The Rams wanted to release Dreyer, but I think Dreyer had a no-cut contract. They released him. They brought him back for a couple games, and then they released him again. And it was just the Rams just decided they didn't want Fred Dreyer anymore. And this was during a period where, man, Bob Brudzinski walked out. Doug France walked out. There was the holdout between who was it? Was it Youngblood, Jack Youngblood, Larry Brooks, and I'm trying to think who the third starter was. They all walked out when the Rams signed the Johnny Johnson signed the contract he did after being drafted out of Texas. And the Rams were in chaos. Missed the playoffs in 81, missed the playoffs in 82. But the only thing that brought stability to that organization was John Robinson. And one of the things we got to give the Rams credit for, I'll give it credit to John Robinson, and I don't know if I want to give credit to John Shaw. As we looked at that 1983 draft, the Rams had the third overall pick, and they sent to Houston the third pick and 2 fourth-rounders to go from 3 to 2. The difference between 3 and 2 was at 2, the Rams could get Eric Dickerson. At 3, ultimately that spot was taken by the Seattle Seahawks, who traded with Houston to move up. They took Penn State's Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner, perennial all-pro back in the 80s, great back. He just wasn't Eric Dickerson, right? And irony was he finished his career in 1990 with the Rams. In that draft also, as Houston moved from 2 to 3 down to number 7, they ended up getting Bruce Matthews, who never missed 20 years, and ended up playing against the Rams in Super Bowl 34. How's that for just that weird symmetry that happens there? But you got to give a lot of credit that they saw Dickerson, they wanted Dickerson, they took Dickerson, and they stuck to their guns because they could have taken a whole bunch of different guys in that draft, and they took Dickerson, and it made all the difference. All right, so we got that in. We are at the 27-minute mark. Reminder again, there are 45 players currently in contract in the Rams roster, so don't just expect them to maybe trade back in the draft to pick up more bodies. And I think that's what the philosophy should be, that you're not necessarily going to move up for the home run grab. I don't know if there's a home run grab. I think the home run grab might be next year. I think what you're going to be looking is for solid bodies to fill out this roster and maybe a few bodies to develop. But right now there's only 45 players on the roster. That's why I think the Rams are going to trade back. On defense, there are 23. Only 13 of them have played significant snaps. On offense, there are 22. 17 have played significant snaps. 0 specialists, no kick returner, punt returner, long snapper, punter, or kicker on this roster. 1 quarterback is on this roster. Available cap space is 7.23. So could we expect a cut or a restructure? Because they're estimating over the cap. Spot Track is estimating the Rams are going to need about 8 rocks total to sign their draft class, and let alone undrafted free agents. And so there should be another cut or expect a restructure going forward. All right. One of the things I posted early this morning was a constructed Rams big board. Okay. And on that big board, what I did was I just took every player the Rams have spoken to or interviewed leading up to the draft. Now, that doesn't mean, they wouldn't be interested in Bijan Robinson at 36 if Bijan Robinson fell at 36, right? They just didn't have an interview scheduled with him. There was only so many you can get in, and these are the interviews that the Rams had. They had something like 35, 37, 40, 47 interviews with players. The Rams have 11 draft picks. And so I created this big board, and I posted it all over social media, and you can see it, where I ranked all the players they interviewed according to where Pro Football Focus ranked them. Like Nolan Smith is the number 1 player the Rams interviewed, highest rated player. He's rated number 13 prospect overall by Pro Football Focus. Kalijah Cansey, number 14, working our way down. Will McDonald IV, Iowa State, number 29, and that's posted there. But, when the Rams interviewed Nolan Smith, or even were interested in him, Kalijah Cansey, all these guys, they were viewed to go in the between 35 and 45 in the draft. And now these guys are viewed as definite first rounders. And we've seen that. Everyone trends up. Some guys trend down, as CJ Stroud is doing today. I did think it was interesting as we get to a mock draft done by my friend Steve Ramirez, retired sports writer. He found Jordan Addison at number 36 for the Rams, the USC wide receiver. Rams haven't interviewed him, but I did see on Monday was the first day, or Tuesday was the first day Jordan Addison had fallen out of the first round. And I definitely think, someone's going to take a tumble as players go up and people get a little, a run takes place on a player. You might even see a run on tight ends because Dalton Kincaid, Mike Mayer from Notre Dame, and Luke Musgrave from Oregon State have all been at one time or another in the first round. And someone might be thinking, hey, I just want to get mine. And maybe all three of them go in the first round, right? And so there could be a run and players can drop. But what I did with this was I just stuck with the players the Rams interviewed, and you can see it there on social media. And I did a mock draft based just strictly on who the Rams interviewed. I did not reach for anybody that they could not draft. I did not make any trades in this mock draft. I just wanted to see what the Rams could end up with. And they ended up at number 36 with Adetomiwa Adebawore, the DT, the very flexible DT at Northwestern at 36. Tank Dell at 69, that kind of figured there. Corey Trice, cornerback, Purdue at number 77. Payne Durham, tight end, Purdue at 167. Israel Abanikande, halfback out of Pittsburgh at 171. Broderick Martin, defensive tackle out of Western Kentucky. All these grades went really well, but the problem was, where do you rate some of these guys? Adebawore is kind of flexible, can be interior, exterior, along the line. And then I reached a little bit at 182. I took MJ Anderson, Iowa State. He's viewed as a flex guy. Weight to play inside, but the athleticism to play on the edge. I took Clayton Tune at 189. Jake Witt, the D2 project, I took him at 191. He's the tackle. Jake Bobo at 223. And DeJuan Johnson with the last pick at 234. Again, all these guys are people the Rams have interviewed. And I'll post that. Maybe I'll drop that into the links when I post this mock draft, so others can see it. I just don't see the Rams not moving back. I could be wrong. It's the Rams, but I don't see the Rams moving back. Steve Ramirez, he found Jordan Addison at number 36 with his mock draft, and Zach Charbonnet at running back at number 69. All right, that's awesome. He got South Dakota State tight end Tucker Kraft. That's the first time I've seen Tucker Kraft. He got him at 81 after making a deal with Detroit. Rams moved back to 81. They pick up the 159th pick from the Lions. So Tucker Kraft at tight end at South Dakota State. Andre Carter, the Army guy who originally, when draft talk was beginning, he was in the top 50. He was viewed top 50. Definitely top 100, and his stock is dropped. They just think he's a raw potential guy. Andre Carter, edge, Army at 159 to the Rams. Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver, 171 out of LSU. That makes sense. Steve showing a little love here for UCLA. Takes Dorian Thompson-Robinson at 182. Mike Morris, edge, Michigan. Antonio Mafi, who I've seen a number of times, guard, UCLA, going to the Rams. Jay Ward, cornerback, LSU, and Javarius Owens, because you got to draft a safety. Questions, feel free to ask. Banter. And I love being told you disagree with me. It's okay to disagree with me. We all have our opinions. But here's the deal. Before you let anybody put you down for your opinion, remember this. Les Snead drafted Greg Robinson. Les Snead drafted Bobby Evans. Les Snead drafted Terrell Burgess, Robert Rochelle, because of the Rams' actions. They're not really high on those guys. And Rochelle Didn't play a lick last year, hardly. So you don't have to say or put up with someone telling you. Now, again, I got 21 years paid sports writer, and there are things I don't know and things I'm still learning. You might have 50 years as a fan, right? You don't have to put up with anyone telling you, oh, just leave it up to the GM. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, when someone drafts Greg Robinson second overall, they kind of lose the credibility or the ability to say, you know what, I can't question you, right? You can trust, I trust Les Snead and Sean McVay, but I can ask a question. Greg Robinson, Bobby Evans. I could ask questions, and so can you, and you don't have to be ashamed or take a back seat to anybody. Your opinions are just as valid as anybody else. All right, cool. I'm Joe Terosian. We will see you soon. Tomorrow's draft day, and we will go from there. God bless, take care, and have a great night.